You're either gonna grow up and be mediocre. You're gonna, do the 9 to 5 and you're gonna be fine. Or you're gonna absolutely kill it. You're gonna dream the best dream you can think of and you're gonna go for it. And at least if you fail, you're still gonna be extraordinary.
You started as a sort of a customer support person and you quickly progressed into the customer support lead. Then you kind of just developed processes and all sorts of things, like in a very short amount of time.
Man, I came from nothing. Certain opportunities to me just seemed like they would be impossible, but here I am. It feels crazy to me sometimes.
So Reggie, you moved from Brazil to US when you were young, 7, right?
Yeah.
What do you remember about that change, I guess, in your life? Do you remember how, the life in Brazil? Do you remember what were like the first days or months or years in US?
It was weird. I watch plenty of sci-fi movies now, so I feel like I can kind of relate to when maybe you visit an alien planet and you have no idea what's happening. I did feel that. At 7 years old, I remember getting on a plane and all these people speaking Portuguese, saying Disney World and Mickey Mouse, and that's all that I was super excited about.
You were coming to Florida?
Coming to Florida,
okay.
Yeah, from Brazil. And, we land, everybody's speaking English. I have no idea what's going on. And I think probably one of the earliest memories I have was when we got enrolled into school. I think I was in first grade when we got here. And my parents had given me like a little card with English on one side, Portuguese on the other side, so I could at least communicate with the teachers with like what I needed. And I was like really thirsty apparently that day, and so I showed her the card and I was trying to tell her, hey, can I get some water? And she nodded her head. Don't remember her name, don't remember exactly the situation. So I walk out of the classroom, walk down the block, and I'm, go to the water fountain. And I'm done. I turn around and I just see her frantically running after me. Reggie, like panic all over her face. I'm like, what is happening? But apparently I had pointed to something that was not water. I don't know what I pointed to, but it freaked her out, the fact that I walked out of the classroom and went out. And I don't think I ever apologized. So, if you're watching, I'm sorry for whatever I pointed to.
Do you remember how long it took you to get like fully acclimated and not feel that you were different?
Yeah, I think I was very fortunate that I was young, right? So I have some older friends who moved here when they were like 12, 13, and I think it took them a little bit longer. I was in the English as a second language class environment for about 3 months. And at that point, like they just took me out of it and I was able to communicate very well. I only remember very small memories and points in time where I did not communicate or feel like I understood anybody.
Right. Do you think that that experience, obviously you were a kid, kind of helped build sort of your ability to sort of persevere or to sort of overcome challenges? Or is that kind of still kind of like early enough to where maybe it was not as kind of consequential?
Yeah, I think it did. I think there's two parts. One, the miscommunication, right? Because that becomes very, very evident when you're learning a new language. You mean to say something, but you don't. I think it really reinforces how important, how crucial communication is. Mm-hmm. And I've really tried to take that into, relationships, my marriage, business. I think that that's something that really hasn't gone away. But I think in general, when you're an immigrant, you're coming into this new culture, you've got two choices, I think, as you're growing up, you're trying to make something of yourself. And I definitely heard that a lot with colleagues who had similar situations, which is you're either going to grow up and be mediocre. You're going to, do the 9 to 5 and you're going to be fine. You're going to this is America, for Christ's sake, right? Like you're going to be fine. Or you're going to absolutely kill it. You're going to dream the best dream you can think of and you're going to go for it. And at least if you fail, you're still going to be extraordinary. And I just had that sense growing up that like I didn't want to do anything less than absolutely chase the dreams that I had for myself and for my family.
And this was in Florida, I'm assuming, a sunny,
beaches,
picturesque town, beaches.
No, it was pretty humble upbringings, I'll say. I think for at least a couple months, we lived with my grandparents who had moved here, I think a year or so before. So 2 or 3 bedroom apartment. I'm a family of, I have 3 siblings plus myself, then my parents, and then I think an aunt or an uncle were living with them at the time. So a big family crammed into a small apartment until my parents were able to get up and running and get us a place. But, it was definitely not traveling to Disney like I thought it was going to be very often. It was very much like watching my parents grow up and trying their best to provide. And, to make ends meet, you know,
Yeah.
and give the opportunities that they could for us.
Do you have any moments that you remember, any funny stories of like trying to fit in? And I guess this idea of trying to fit in, does that have like an everlasting impact on you?
Yeah, I think that fitting in, because I was so young, I do still kind of consider myself for the best. I feel American. You know, I don't really feel for a lot of things, in a lot of ways that maybe people who come a little older feel that, oh, I'm a Brazilian that had to adapt in a lot of ways. I think a lot of it just kind of comes to some funny experiences I had with just learning the English, you know? I think I did milk it for a while where I realized that there's a benefit to pretending you don't really understand English. And poor elementary school teachers. There was a teacher, I think we were doing some sort of group activity and accidentally kicked her under the table. And I knew that I accidentally kicked her under the table. And I didn't fully understand. I knew she was trying to probably get an apology out of me. And I just kind of tried to pretend like I had no idea what she was talking about. So probably some bad examples of things that kept happening where I wasn't apologizing. But those are the things that I definitely remember, you know, like I tried to find opportunities where it was to my benefit to not learn English.
I got you. So I think a lot of sort of first generation immigrants, they tend to be extremely hardworking and sort of with this extreme tenacity and hunger to sort of make a better life. From what I know, your parents were examples of that, like extremely hardworking. How did that translate into sort of your sort of experiences? How does that translate into your sort of life today?
Yeah, my dad, my mom too, like they both worked really hard. I mean, we saw it right from the beginning. It was humble. Like, it's not like we could go everywhere and say, hey, I would love this and I would love that gift. You know, Christmases, we knew that they were doing their best. And part of me, and I had a conversation with my brother a couple years ago where we just remember we kind of felt like we shouldn't ask for much because we knew how much they were working. And so we were just, as best as we could, just be grateful for everything that they had. But I very much remember my dad just never complaining. You know, he was a programmer. You know, by trade, he had worked at one of the top 3 banks in Brazil at the time, Y2K, all that stuff. And so to see him delivering newspapers overnight and, you know, cleaning offices, being a janitor part-time, just to make sure that we had what we needed as a family was something that I definitely never forgot. He never complained. He knew that, like, hey, I have a family. I'm going to provide for them. I'm here to provide opportunities. And I'm going to do what I need. And that's something that definitely stuck with me, even till today, that work ethic, you know, that mentality of like, there's nothing below me. There's nothing beneath me. I'm going to do what I need to do for my family.
And I can totally relate to that. I think the generation sort of our parents, that were just sort of the adults that landed in this country. I remember them doing all that hard work, but they didn't care. They did it with a smile because to them, it was such a sort of easy thing to do relative to the world they knew before this. This is such a great opportunity. Not only was it delivering results to the family, but also they kind of saw the kids getting sort of integrated. They saw the future for the kids. So this notion that like their lives didn't matter as much. They were just there to make sure that the next generation kind of goes and has their life.
Yeah.
So I think I can totally relate to that. So do you remember, I guess, what were your early jobs, I guess? Do you remember, were they like part-time jobs? Were you helping your parents with things?
Yeah, I mean, I think like official jobs probably wasn't until I was in high school. I had a first gig at Dunkin Donuts. I think my mom's friend like managed a couple. She was a GM, I think, and so we worked at Dunkin for the summer, and that was like, you know, my first clocking in and clocking out experience.
Is that why you can never go to Dunkin again?
That's why I hate coffee, to be honest. The stench of coffee. I would shower 3 times a night before starting my homework because of how bad it just smelled.
Really?
So I can't stand the taste, and rarely the smell of coffee does me well. But I definitely remember, you know, earlier on, like helping my dad. First couple years in the U.S., he was delivering newspapers overnight, and I remember just being in the car with him at 2:00 in the morning, and the excitement of being able to throw it out the car window, and you know him like, hey, be careful, don't break someone's window and stuff like that. So those are memories and moments that we were able to have.
2 a.m. in the morning,
Probably
throwing
like
newspapers.
8 or 9 o'clock, and
Oh, wow.
8 or 9 years old. But
Wow.
like this was super early in the morning. I don't remember if it was maybe the weekend or maybe if it was over the summer. But I definitely remember moments where he invited me, like, hey, do you want to come with me? So again, like it just gave me glimpses of that work ethic for him, of seeing that. And I think growing up, as I saw, like I said, I kind of grew up in this community here in South Florida where there's just a lot of immigrants. And in the pocket that I grew up, it was a lot of Brazilian immigrants like myself who were young. Their family came to the U.S. for better opportunities. And I'd say that a lot of them that I grew up with didn't necessarily share the perspective of nothing is beneath me kind of a thing, you know?
Yeah.
So it was something that I never really felt challenged, you know, me going over the weekends. And I remember even through high school, on the weekends, I would go with my dad to go clean the office buildings and the bathrooms and whatever we needed to do, helping him out. And sometimes I think he would be on vacation or whatever it would be, and he would ask me, hey, do you mind going for me? And I would go, and I would take care of making sure that everything was clean and all of that. I think even when I moved back home from college, you know, I was still looking for work. I would help him out. And I would definitely say a lot of my colleagues would not have approached it that way. You know, it's like, hey, Dad, you're an engineer. What are you doing? Like, no,
Right.
you got to find. Now, 2025, my dad's a VP at Citi. So, like, you know, he sacrificed, but he's made it. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm very grateful, and I'm very happy to see when he got his job there, and, you know, the whole journey that it took for him to be at Citi as a VP. It's a great experience to see on the other side, because we saw all the work he had to put in after all of that. And so that just kind of reiterated to me, like, man, you got to put in the work. Like, there is no sacrifice or no job that's beneath you. You got to put in the work to provide for your family. And if you work hard,
That's
and
awesome.
you've got that drive, you're going to get there.
That's awesome. You moved here at 7. By 12, I understand you are building websites, having jobs. What drives that?
I'm a very curious person. I was having a conversation the other day with some friends, and my wife is telling them how annoying it is, how I will somehow explore a topic and get so fixated on learning everything about that topic that for 48 hours, I do nothing but research and read and watch until I feel I know everything I wanted to know about that topic. So I think there was like a level of curiosity. You know, I remember in Brazil, right before we moved, my dad, through a company incentive there, purchased a personal computer, those big clunky ones that you had to do to get on the internet.
Right.
And it just seemed crazy that there was an entire world sitting on that box on the desk. We had free internet access on Sundays after, I think, like 4 p.m. So there was like an hour where my parents would like sit down with us and like, oh, look, you know, this is so cool. And I think there were like demo discs of like little computer games or stuff like that. Uh-huh. So I definitely was always very, very curious. And, you know, obviously with my dad being a programmer back in Brazil, I was interested. I was curious. So there were opportunities, right? Like I started getting curious about how computers worked, how websites worked. And I started helping out some church members. I was involved in the church pretty early on. People would get viruses on their computers and didn't know what to do. And I'm like, hey, you know, let me take a look. And the curiosity just turned into like a little tiny side hustle for myself.
I understand there's a funny story about you and saving of documents.
Oh, gosh.
What is that about?
Yeah, so I had an uncle. Unfortunately, he's passed since, but he was also like an engineer, and he did a lot of consulting. So we had a computer at home, and this is in the U.S. now. And I think my parents needed some help. They were trying to write something on a document and print it out. And, you know, I remember if it was like a resume at the time, but I couldn't for my life figure out what I was doing wrong. I would type up a document and I would save it. And then, you know, next day I would open it up, and the thing that I had created was no longer there, is now this new thing. And what I didn't understand is that I kept overwriting the file. I would save the new thing I had typed on that Word document as the same name as the original file. And it was just so frustrating. So I call up this uncle. He comes over and he's like, look, I'm going to explain to you how this works. So he went through, you know, this is a folder, and this is what this means, and this is how we organize things. This is how you plug in the printer, and this is where we're going to. So, like, he gave me the crash course on how to use a computer. Mm-hmm. And I think that sparked even more curiosity for myself, you know?
Do you think that the early projects, like, you know, building the websites or helping the church, did they sort of help you kind of propel you in what you do today? Did they contribute to you being like great at dealing with customers and developing all sorts of processes around that? Do you think there is a connection?
Yeah, I think so. No matter the scale of the business, whether, you know, you're doing a little hustle like I was, fixing computers at the church or building websites for some local businesses, I don't think that there are lessons you wouldn't learn regardless of the scale. You know, I had to figure out customer service, right? Someone calls me up and says, the website's down. Or in this case, I forgot to renew my domain and my website's down, right? Like the customer service, we're going to go to GoDaddy and we're going to renew it. This is what we're going to do, you know? Or even just sales, right? Like I was 13 years old, had my mom driving me to small businesses office to pitch to them, you know, based on an ad I put on a little newspaper locally. And so you're learning, like, okay, what did I say in that last conversation that made them not feel great about a 13-year-old charging $500 for a website, right? So I think lots of those experiences led me to refining some skills very, very early on. Before I even thought about entrepreneurship, business, technology, it was just this solution-minded thing. Someone's got a problem. Seems like I have a way to deliver that value to them.
So in terms of, it's common knowledge, right, that hunger and drive, right, are sort of the engine, and the hard work is a necessary factor as well, almost like fuel to this whole thing. What moment sort of in your life kind of, when it clicked, essentially, what drove you to kind of where you end up today?
Yeah, the consistency, I would definitely say, is the fuel. It's key. I remember when I was getting started in customer service, it might have been with you, actually. A decade ago.
A decade, yeah.
I knew when I was getting started, I don't necessarily think in 3-year goals, 5-year goals, or anything like that, but I knew that this was a long-term thing for me. I didn't want to be in customer service and then maybe become team lead eventually. Like I knew that I wanted more. And in my head, I guess maybe some of that mentality where I saw my dad just always doing more, going above and beyond. What I could have done was probably just my job, you know, answer support tickets, calls from customers, and just clocked out at 5 and be done, and taking my weekend and taking my PTOs and all that stuff. But there was definitely this mindset of I can't expect to grow and to do more without providing more value. And so I started looking for ways to provide more value to the organization. It's like, okay, well, beyond my job expectations and description, where can I be stepping in to provide more value? Can I be looking at maybe newer initiatives that we can try to drive business results in customer service? Can I work a little bit later today because of certain urgencies that are happening within the organization? And I think the more I stepped out of that 9-to-5 mentality and more into the how much more value can I be providing, the more it was seen, and the quicker, you know, I kind of started going through some of the ranks there. And it even translated to, you know, a company got acquired, a private equity company comes in, offers me a full-time job, and there was opportunities there as well where I could have just, it's gonna stay right here, I'm gonna feel good, but I definitely believe a lot of those opportunities that came up out of that were just them seeing how much I was putting into it, how much value I was delivering beyond just the black and white job description.
And it seems such a simple concept, right? So essentially what you're saying is that just look beyond, right, the sort of the job definition on its surface and think of ways, right, to deliver more value. Yeah. And I think lucky for you, I guess, with our prior business, you were on such fertile ground, right? Meaning that whatever you planted just came right back to you. And I wish for every company, and you know how we always talk about like the way we try to structure our business where the compensation is directly connected to the performance, right? Yeah. So that way it's a bi-directional road. I think like in that case, like you were really sort of lucky that that existed, and it was kind of early enough to where it must have been very satisfying to kind of like deliver more and get more, and then have that cycle be very short, like to where you do it and it comes back, like not like years out, but like right away.
For sure.
So I think
and here's the thing, I have so many conversations, and it upsets me. It makes me pretty sad to be having these conversations, but I have the hunger, I have the drive, I have the dream, but it's like, oh, you know, I wasn't feeling that great, so I left at 3 today, and this, and that. And like, I get it. Look, we're human. We're going to have those situations. But if the consistency is that you are not consistent in delivering good results, and you're not a hard worker, like, man, you're only going to get so far. So I definitely think that you can't have half of that formula. You got to have the consistency and the hard work, and you can't just rely on that drive and that hunger that you have. But you're right. Not every organization is going to match that, but I'd be surprised that if someone entered any organization and didn't provide an exceptional amount of value to that organization, that it wouldn't be seen one way or another, and that as a result, you wouldn't be growing within that, you know? And obviously, you know, I know I sometimes talk about faith, and I think that, for me at least, I feel like that's part of the equation as well. You know, like I would not be here without some opportunities. I mean, applying for certain jobs, things that seem like miraculous for me, like where, man, I came from nothing. You know, certain opportunities to me just seem like they would be impossible.
Right.
But, you know, here I am. It feels crazy to me sometimes.
I would love for you to tell the story, right, of the job that you started with our prior company was, you know, you started as a sort of a customer support person, and you quickly progressed into the customer support lead, and you were amazing at it, and you kind of just developed processes and all sorts of things, like in a very short amount of time. But I'd love for you to kind of just tell the story of where you came from. Clearly, there was no professional customer service background when you joined, right? I think that story is super compelling because people might be thinking that, like, that type of success or that type of career, there has to be, I don't know, an educational background for it. There has to be some sort of like an experience years long for it, right?
Yeah.
But there wasn't anything like that. Where did you come from? What was the job that you had before you entered this? Was it related to SaaS, tech, and customer support?
You know, that's a great question. And to my parents' great disappointment at the time, I was a film school student who was looking for an opportunity, realizing I not only did not want to be in medicine like my parents originally wanted me to be, film seemed unrealistic. I didn't want to start delivering coffees and getting people's dry cleaning in California where pricing for everything seemed extremely unreasonable. So I think at the time I had gotten a job with Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Had a management training program. Sounds fancy, but all it really is that you sit at the counter and you give people keys to their cars, and every once in a while, when the people responsible for washing the cars didn't show up, you were out there washing cars in a suit and tie in 95-degree weather in Florida. And so I did that for a while. Very salesy. I kind of had to learn, right? Like the whole thing is like you move up if you sell them insurance. That's the whole key of the game, right? You sell them all these insurance products.
Noted.
So you got it. You got it.
Don't buy it.
And you move up. I got credit cards to take care of that stuff. I love going in and saying I don't need it. I don't need it. But I think eventually at one point, because I had gotten a real estate license to help me pay for college, that film school, because, you know, immigrant, a lot of those times you don't really actually get to have student loans. Even if you want to get yourself in debt, you really can't.
Right.
I was working at Enterprise, and I started doing like their people get into car accidents. I was doing claims, and again, no formal education. Didn't go to Harvard. Didn't go to a course about how to do customer service. But I do think that those, you know, experiences doing websites and doing that stuff, I learned some aspects of making sure the customer's happy, making sure and things like that.
There are always relationships between things, but I'm just saying there's no like direct relationship, right? So there are bits and pieces here. You were dealing with customers, obviously, here and there. You had some tech background, but like there is nothing to necessarily prepare you for the job. I think it's a very compelling story because like a lot of people don't necessarily sort of appreciate the fact that such careers, right, are purely about your commitment, your work ethic, your desire to succeed. I always talk about how one should be looking for work, not by trying to post on the career board or anything like that, but try to go to the company, try to offer yourself as a trainee, work for free, be ambitious, like offer a lot of service, like offer value. And there are plenty of takers, like you'll be offered these careers, you will make a career, even if you didn't have the necessary background. So I love that story.
Let me ask you this then, because, you know, going into customer service, remote work, when remote work wasn't even a thing. I mean, I'll be honest, the first time I started working remotely, people were like, this kid is unemployed and he's trying to lie to us, you know? What about a kid who was working at a rental car agency spoke to you in that interview that you were like, yeah, I'm gonna hire Reggie?
It's been so long ago. I think it's a diamond and sort of in the rough kind of thing, right? So I was interviewing for customer support role. Your resume came through. I guess the conversation was normal, and you were, it was a good conversation. I guess you didn't give any signals that would have worried me one way or another. I don't remember this being a high-paying job either, so let's
No.
be very clear about that. Like, this was a very sort of entry-level kind of salary.
Yeah.
I can't remember if you took a pay cut to get here or you didn't. That I don't remember. Yeah, so I think, again, you just didn't say anything wrong and you said everything right. And by right, I mean just normal kind of answers to normal questions. I guess the demeanor, I think, was helpful. I guess I saw that the demeanor was sort of very you were poised enough to kind of handle, because a lot of stuff in customer support is about diffusing the situations. Like if the situation is escalating, you can't take anything personal. Like you have to diffuse it, no matter what you feel about it. And I guess you came across as such a person with enough poise. But everything else is really lottery because, arguably, now as you hire, people, then it's at best, it's a 50-50 game. Even the best interviewed person with the best scores, right, on IQ and all sorts of other attention to detail and ability to do this or that, don't necessarily end up proving much, right? So their success is a bit of a lottery. So I think that's kind of also like a strategy that a lot of businesses have. They hire more and then they just shed, whatever didn't work for them. But so I got totally lucky, and I'm glad that you feel the same. So the next question is: company you worked for was purchased. There was an opportunity you were offered that shook you pretty what?
Pretty bad. Whoops, forgot to add that.
Pretty bad. Okay, so it's negative, right? So something happened that kind of shook you. Okay. As we often talk about our prior company, the company was acquired and you were offered a position, I think of the same level. I think you were still kind of in support. But now that did not work as well for you, even maybe downright shook your confidence and whatnot, right? What happened?
Yeah, so I think when they offered me the job originally to kind of work for them, it was pretty lateral. It was like, I think at that point in time I was leading the support team. And I think it was maybe 6-8 months in, the VP of product reached out and he said, Reggie, we want you to take over product strategy for the company. And that's what really shook me. I kind of struggle with this, and I still kind of do, where there is that feeling, and I always forget the word, and I think it's subconsciously I forget it on purpose. I feel like a fraud sometimes. Like one day someone's gonna pick up the phone and be like, Reggie, I'm on to you. I know that you have no idea what you're doing. And I felt that so bad that whole weekend. They told me to think about it over the weekend and give them an answer on Monday. But I just very, very much remember being so afraid. I'm like, I can't take this role. Like, I'm going to destroy the company. This is going to be terrible. They're going to figure out, that I'm a fraud or whatever. But I just figured I'm going to fail. I'm going to embarrass myself. It's going to be terrible. I'm going to set myself back. And then I'll probably be unhireable after the fact. But my wife, she really kept me back to if they're offering you this opportunity to oversee product, it's not because you have that formal education that you were talking about, right? They didn't ask to see your credentials from Stanford or whatever it might be. They think that you have what it takes to do the role that they're hiring you for. And, it went back to the faith thing as well, because I really do believe that sometimes opportunities come to you because they're aligned with the interest, with the goal that God has ultimately for my life and where he wants me to be in the future. But I think the saying that I like to, I guess preachers use it a lot. I don't think it only applies to preachers, where God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. What that translates to in my mind when I'm talking about careers and career journeys is I like to tell people that don't wait until you're ready to either start or go after the thing. Like, you're going to get ready as you're going towards it. Because the first couple of months of me leading product there was not pretty. I'll tell you that right now. I very quickly learned that I had a lot of learning to do on terminology, on just basic concepts around user experience. What does that mean? Like, what does it mean to design an experience for a customer so that it's frictionless as much as you can? And so I had to research a lot. It wasn't pretty, but I got ready as I was in the journey instead of waiting until I was ready. And I could have very easily turned down that job, and I'm glad I didn't.
But I also want to point out that this is like a good example of how we always talk about how experience matters, right? How you want to hire people that have done it before. But now we've just talked through sort of a couple of examples where it didn't matter. So it looks like there is a lot of opportunity, right, within companies where you can have a career in support for as long as you are clever, a fast learner, a hard worker, and willing to take that sort of go out of your comfort zone, whatever that is, to try this out,
Yeah.
you can become a head of product, which you haven't done before, for as long as, again, you're willing to go out of the comfort zone, work hard, and more than ask, just to kind of deliver.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it seems like a lot of opportunities, but also kind of makes me kind of interested that even the bigger companies seem to be in the position where they have, because ideally, like as a company, why would you want to take that risk? Like, would you want to hire a plumber it is his first day on the job?
Yeah.
And he's been, lawnmower before this, but now he wants to try this out, on your, heating system. But it seems like a lot of businesses are like in a position where they have to look hard for resources, even taking chances on them, right? But I think it's sort of like an interesting dynamic, right?
Yeah.
And plenty of opportunity for people to kind of just build careers around this.
Yeah. And I will say too, I think looking back, I was probably the first kind of risk that they took in that perspective, but I did, right before I left, a couple years later, I did see that become a pattern. And I wonder if, maybe I shouldn't sell the secret sauce, but there are software companies out there. Seems like there's a more natural transition into product from customer support because you're so involved with the customers and you're listening to the pain points, but you're also listening to why they got there in the first place, that it almost becomes kind of a breeding ground for training for product. But they did it a couple more times and definitely succeeded. I saw that succeed very well with some other companies.
Yeah, I definitely believe that, if you speak to enough customers, you can have a much better understanding of what the product needs to be than if you just sort of approach this from some other product that you've done and there's some sort of a theory on UI, UX or something.
Yeah.
As a co-founder sort of a Vista Social, right? So how do you but obviously your day-to-day responsibilities are in like support and sales, right? So which is a tall, big ask, right? It's a vast area, right? With a lot of things happening. How would you describe sort of your sort of leadership style, your sort of approach to things? Are you an easy sort of boss to work for? Do you think you are sort of effective at what you do? By that I mean, can you get stuff out of people that perhaps they're not willing to give or don't know how to give, like what's your style?
I think I lean really heavily on trust and clarity and transparency, kind of interchangeably, clarity and transparency. I think it's first of all, almost impossible to get a team to stick around for long enough to do some meaningful things if they don't trust you, if they don't trust that you have good intentions for their career, their future. So those two things are huge. If they don't trust you, they're not going to follow you.
What do you mean by that trust? Like, I mean, what's there to trust? Like, they're going to get paid at the end of the month?
I think it's more than that. I think the trust, from my experience, when an employee feels like a number, that's one thing, right? We're talking about being respectful, not necessarily having trust. Now, you go from, okay, I don't feel like a number, but this person asks me about how my weekend was. And a couple months later, he remembers that I had dinner with my mom that I hadn't seen 6 months ago and is asking, hey, you're going to take some time off to see your mom again. And that personal connection that you start developing with the person where they decide to share, hey, I'm having a difficult time in this place or, in my personal life, I'm having a tough challenge here. And you get to start mentoring them in other ways. You show them that at the end of the day, yes, we are a business and we have metrics and there are consequences to not doing your job. Absolutely. But I see you here as more than a number. You are a human being, and to the best of my ability, I'm going to help you to get where you want to be. And if it's within my power, we're going to work together to find an opportunity that works for you. We're going to give you the resources that you need to be successful here. That type of trust, where they see you as not just a supervisor, a boss, all those toxic things you see on TikTok of like corporate bosses and whatnot, but they see you as someone who sees them as a human, I think is huge. You have more influence in that way.
Yeah, so I always talk about how we want to be, obviously, we need to be a very disciplined place where we can't afford any sort of shenanigans, any sort of nonsense, any lack of quality. So our standards are extremely high. And I think that manifests itself in fairly extreme sort of approach to customer service as to how much care we insist on the team produces, right, towards our users. But at the same time, I kind of also want people to feel like it's also a fun environment to be in, but like in a good way fun, right? So yes, we don't have a ping pong table just because we don't have an office. Sure, fine.
Yeah.
So we don't do like expensive, not yet anyways, right? So we don't do like expensive corporate retreats in exotic countries, right? But it does not necessarily mean that by not like offering like high-end perks like that we're not a caring kind of environment where both fun things can occur, where people can feel the warmth, right, of just relationship, because they spend a lot of time working, right? So during that time, it's sort of important that they also kind of feel good about the environment. I think that's kind of the overall system, right, that we're trying to like create here. So
and here's the tough thing too. I think a lot of people, we were talking about this earlier, where they get thrust into this leadership role where they're managing people, and they're not prepared for difficult conversations you're going to have to face. And I do like to say that you need to be very comfortable with uncomfortable conversations if you're going to be leading people, because the tendency is to beat around the bush when I need to have a conversation about your performance. And I'm going to try to figure out a way to compliment sandwich you, or I'm going to tell you all these beautiful things about what you're doing and then sneak in the thing that I want you to change because it's not working well, and then just finish up with. And it just feels gross being on the receiving end. You know, I did corporate for a while and I did a lot of stuff. It just doesn't feel great being on the receiving end of that, where you can tell there's almost a dishonesty about, by the time it gets bad enough that I'm fired. Oh, luckily I've never been fired, but I've definitely seen this experience. It's like, it should not be a surprise. That's part of my philosophy, is that if I have to get to the point where we're having a conversation about termination, this should not be a surprise. So consistent alignment and clarity on, hey, this isn't working.
what do you say to people that think that directness of criticism is toxic?
That's look, you can be truthful and be kind at the same time. I can tell you, hey, you suck at your job. You are not driving the results. I'd say that.
Okay, what if you are as polite as you can be? And by that I mean as appropriate as you can be. You don't have to be polite. You have to be like appropriate.
Yeah.
Right? You're very appropriate, but still, I guess it could be viewed as toxic if it's the kind of job environment where everything I do is subject for there's always something wrong, because that pursuit of perfection, that's what it entails, right? Constant steering, right? Constant, this could be done better, that could be done better. It's like a never-ending process. So you got to have people willing to kind of be on that boat, right? To be willing to be part of that process, right? And this constant, or frequent enough, reminders that is that toxic or is that not toxic?
So you mentioned the boat. So let me give you this. I don't think it's toxic, but I think it requires buy-in from a vision. If we're all on the same boat there, right? Like the team members are not, the second things get tough, we're jumping off the ship, and unless we are very confident that the captain is taking us to the direction that we want to go in, and that he's going to be able to get us there. So when we have these tough conversations on realignment, even if it's consistent, and even if it's like that perfectionist state that we want to get to, where it could always be better, because it's true, things could always be better. But I think if there's the trust there and there's the buy-in that hey, we're all doing this for something really good. We're all doing this for the benefit of our customers and customer service. Let's be honest, in sales, for the commission check that comes at the end of the month. You'd be surprised how much more people are willing to. So I'll give you an example. A while ago, I had a conversation with kind of a leader at one of my organizations, and he was just struggling for a while. And like I said,
struggling how?
Shouldn't be a surprise. The metrics weren't being met. KPIs weren't being met. When we talk about how things could be better, there are clear goals for a quarterly basis, semi-annual, annual basis, and they weren't being hit. We were getting close to the end of the quarter, and we had already been in line a couple of weeks in a row that looked like things were not going to get to where it's going to get. And conversation pretty much went like this. Now, obviously, this has been years of building that relationship and that trust, but the conversation was simply like, hey, I had noticed a couple of things happening, so I wanted to kind of come to the conversation out of curiosity, because this was new. They hadn't gotten to that point before. What's happening? What's going on? Is there something at home? And that person really opened up. They opened up about things going on that definitely had nothing to do with work, but clearly were impacting their ability to deliver results. So I told them, take the weekend, take care of that. If you need an extra couple of days here, just take care of that situation, be there. But I want you to really think about whether this is the right role for you. Because what this role, and exactly what you said, entails is that constant push towards better and better for our customers, for ourselves, for our team. We're all in the same boat here. And I want you to really think about it and look. And at the end of the day, you come back to me and you tell me, hey, this just isn't the right fit. This is too much for me. This organization is moving at a speed that just isn't aligned with where I want to be. Whatever that might be, I'll be fine. I'll help you write a reference letter. You know, you can stay as long as you need to until you find another opportunity. That's fine. And at the end of it, you know, person took a couple of days, came back. I really honestly expected a resignation at the end of that conversation. But they came back like on fire. And months later, when I was really expecting it to almost be like a temporary thing, like the momentum has not stopped and did not stop for months and months and months and months. And so that was really, really cool to see. But again, it's
knock on wood.
It's a conversation. It's a conversation that happens, but it could be taken as toxic, yeah, depending on the employee. But I think it also depends on your approach and the relationship and what has led to that moment and how clear you have been, and how you led those conversations and alignments till then.
So you talk about not treating people as numbers and how these kind of more human relationships matter. Do you ultimately feel sort of responsible for things that kind of spill over into sort of people's sort of lives beyond work? So clearly we want so much out of people who work for us. And by the way, full disclosure, as I always kind of frame this, you and I put same, if not more hours into this than anybody on the team. So we're clearly leading by example, right?
Sure.
So without a doubt. So I think like if anybody's listening to this thinking that two sort of founders are, have created like a sweatshop where they're trying to drive things out of people, I think we definitely lead by example, and I think people see it. But I think ultimately, do you feel responsible for this sort of spillover into their personal lives because you've kind of we've asked so much of them, they left so much energy. So what does that spillage look like? Is there a way to sort of mitigate that? Because obviously if people have problems sort of outside of their work, it's going to come right back at us like a boomerang, right? So it's coming back. So how do you ensure that sort of doesn't spill over?
In my experience, I've seen less situations where, as long as there is alignment and we're moving in the same direction, meaning we have very high expectations as an organization, but the compensation structure, your growth structure, your satisfaction about the job, if that's aligned, I rarely see it. Even when we're pushing to 120%, as we generally are as an organization, I rarely see that be something that creates a negative experience spilling after work. What I've seen, unfortunately, is that when we are not treating people with honor, dignity, and respect, and I'll give you a clear example. A supervisor calls an employee into the office, just rips into them completely. You know,
it's a hypothetical.
Hypothetical here.
Sure.
But let's think about it this way. Like, I look at the example that I gave you where we approached it a little bit differently, but how did I approached it in a situation where, like, hey, you're fired. I'm not giving you a chance. I've told you before, look, this is it. The company needs to do this. You're not doing it. You're out of here, right? The frustration, the emotion, all of that. When I talk about the spillage, they go home and almost to mirror what has happened to them in that level of anger and frustration to their spouse, to their kids. And what happens is that enough of those experiences, maybe not necessarily being fired, but consistently working with a manager or supervisor or leader, that is that toxic relationship. You bring that toxicity into that marriage, into those kids, and those kids grow up thinking that is normal. That's how dad treats mom, and that's how dad treats me. So they bring that into society and treat their kids that way and their spouse that way. So I do take it as a responsibility, and I don't take it lightly, that the way that I treat the team and the departments and the leads, that I'm very aware of the words that come out of my mouth and the impact they could have to them, to their family, to their kids, and maybe overkill, but to the generations that come after, for sure. And not necessarily in a bad way, because I most often think about the positive things that and I've heard this before, that the different approach to leading them, how that has given them the desire. In another organization that I led, I've had employees say, like, I've gotten job offers that were significantly higher, but I do not want to leave. I have never had a leader who approaches this like you. And I do not want to leave this organization.
Extra few bucks, yeah.
So, like, imagine the positivity that then translates into their family, into their kids, and all that sort of stuff.
Right. So we've been building Vista Social for, what is it? We are, I think, in our, fourth year now. Brick by brick, customer question by customer, answer to customer question by answer to customer question,
Yeah.
issue by issue, hire by hire. It's a grind. How do you think we're doing?
I'm loving it. I think the journey has been fun. I remember the first $500 or $800 it was in revenue. We were so excited. But I'm just as pumped now. We've got a team and we're seeing the impact and everything that we're able to do with that. Going from formatting computers and building websites for little local businesses when I was young to now. I think it definitely has been easier. And that's rare with, an awesome CEO like you, a co-founder like you, because I have seen the case where, and I hear this a lot, when you are in a partner in a business, it is like a marriage, right? And it could go very wrong or it could do really well.
Right.
And so I'm definitely grateful to have had, you mentor me in the past and the opportunity to come to this business and be a co-founder here with you. I'm excited. I think at the core, a lot of what we do is about trying to make things easier, better, improve the life of our customer, which is the social media manager, the marketer. And we see that, we hear so many great testimonials every single week. I mean,
How does that feel? So when you shared the other day, like some testimonials like of a user who was just raving right about us. How does that feel? How does that make the team feel when they see this stuff?
those wins, they get shared internally, which I love. There's almost a sense of pride, like we did that, like we 100 million views reached using Vista Social. We were saving dozens of thousands of dollars just by the efficiency that this tool is able to get us as we scale as an organization. Like that's crazy to hear the impact that we have in one organization,
Right.
multiplied by all these customers that we don't hear from that I'm sure are relatively happy. Let's call it that. But it's just cool to see. I think one of the things that I really like to look back and see is, obviously we had very different upbringings and situations were different, but I do like to think that the similarity of just being an immigrant, coming to the United States and seeing parents who kind of had to sacrifice a lot. I think that gives us similar drives in a lot of ways. And so it's been really cool to work with. I mean, it'd be tough to have a partner who did want to clock out at, 3 p.m. and go sip mimosas, but expect the entire team to work like a horse. Like that's a tough pill to swallow.
So I think like this whole immigrant experience, to me, it's you can sort of go to a top school. You can go to Stanford, right? You can go to Harvard, right? Maybe you can get lucky to have that drive through some other means. Although I think like if you look at the top performers, like top SaaS companies, top businesses, there is a lot of Stanford, there's a lot of Harvard. Like they come prepared. I guess the filtration system to get into these institutions is massive, so they just get a lot of top talent into those places, and that top talent goes on to succeed. Clearly, neither you nor I went to Stanford or Harvard, but I think our advantage is sort of this immigrant background and the tenacity of that.
Yeah.
That's our edge. So yes, we may not have the necessary diplomas, but we are just as dangerous, when it comes to competitors. So I just want them to know this.
For sure.
All right. So starting anything from scratch, right, is very different than joining the team, right, joining the organization that sort of exists, right? Day one, you are the only customer support agent, and day whatever 1,000 or whatever day we're in right now. So there's an organization of 10 people or so, right, under you within support. So what is that journey like to kind of start from scratch? Because I think a lot of people don't really sort of understand the fear factor, perhaps, or the kind of how difficult it is to get anything from the ground zero, and how vastly different it is from just joining, again, something that already exists and running.
Yeah. I think the beauty of it, and look, it's challenging. It's very challenging, right? Because for a very long time, you don't have a lot of processes in place, right? You're pulling things out of your mind. When you hire your first hire, you're realizing that everything I know is up here, and it's hard to train somebody and expect them to deliver results when you're expecting them to read your mind, right? So very quickly you realize that no one's a mind reader. I have to ensure that they have the resources, and if that means documenting everything that's in my head so that they don't always have to come, Reggie, I need this, Reggie, I need that. How do I do this? How do I do that? The challenge is probably in the growth pains that you might feel when you're not necessarily being forward thinking. What am I going to need 10 employees from now? What am I going to need 20 employees from now? What am I going to need when we double in size from a customer base? How is it going to look different to support and to serve those customers at that scale versus the scale 4 or 5 years ago, right? So it's a fun journey. It's the challenge, and I don't know if that's something that you find enjoyable. I thrive in that challenge.
I think the whole experience of building companies is completely magical. I mean, just think about what we do. We are essentially building a product out of nothing that helps thousands of people, that facilitates their business and subsequently employs like this vast amount of people. So we have like several thousand customers. These several thousand customers have several thousand employees. So these several thousand employees, they have like probably, a handful of kids each, right? So there's like this network of people that we are touching, right, by building something like this. So I'm not even talking about the fact that we're making money doing this, but just the sheer ability to create something that is used by just vast amounts of people, that is useful, that is money generating, right? And it was literally created off a laptop on a desk. Like there is no machinery, there are no significant investments, right? To me, just magical. Like the whole experience is magical. So I did want to ask you. So again, from the building from the ground up perspective, and the fact that you have to hire, and the fact that not every hire is perfect, right? What do you think is like a reasonable percentage success ratio of hires to keepers?
That's a tough one. And I think it just depends where your organization is in your recruiting efforts.
But like in your experience, like what have you seen like with Vista, for example? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? Is it 50-50?
Vista's scale of hiring, and I'll give you another example and then I'll come back to Vista.
Sure.
So another organization that I've been consulting with for a while, the sheer scale of how many hires have to be done on a quarterly basis allows you to learn very quickly from mistakes, meaning this. Let's say on average, pretty realistic number, 600 applications in a given week. Can't possibly go through every single one of those resumes unless you have a team of 20 people, right?
Sure.
And from a profitability standpoint, unrealistic. So you try to figure out, okay, what kind of questions should I be asking that I know very well when I get to the interview? This is a no, then this is clearly a no for me, right? And so you get better at filtering the resumes based on what you see are your top performers. What are the questions that I should be asking? What are the questions that I've noticed when answered a certain way lead to this type of performance or leads to a candidate that we hire that is not very coachable? It's harder to do that's why I said, depending on where you are as an organization and your growth, it's tougher because in the beginning, a startup may not have 600 applications every month that they're actively
No, but I'm talking
interviewing.
about the actual hires. So like you've hired the person, but then you're having to let them go, which is obviously like super frustrating because you wasted time. So for people not to get overly frustrated, is it like one hire missed for every one hire kept? Is it like it's okay to hire 5 but only keep 1? Just not from the interview. I completely understand like the interview process is horrific.
But
because you have to,
that's what leads to that, right? Like if I'm not hiring the right people, then maybe I am keeping 1 employee out of 10 I hire.
Right.
Because I'm not finding the right people. I'm not giving the correct people the opportunities that match with what they need and what we need. And so that's why I'm kind of saying like it's tough, right? Because hopefully you get to a point in an organization where you're recruiting, you know exactly what your most successful team members are doing, your A players, the qualification, not necessarily the qualification, the qualities. And how do we then interview for those so that we bring them? Realistically, it's great to have a retention where every, let's say 10 people you're hiring, you may be letting go of 1 or 2. That's the ultimate goal within, let's say, a 6-month period. Different organizations, different industries are probably going to be not as great, but that's ultimately where we've gotten to with this organization that I've consulted. And so they were in one city for, I think, almost 4 years, and they started all over again in a different city. And it was a very similar trajectory that we saw. Thousands of applications per month. Sheer demographics were so different in those cities that they really kind of had to start over again, rethinking how the questions and, what are we looking for? And so it definitely starts with like, hey, we're going to hire 30 people this quarter, but oh man, we just lost 20. Okay, what did we do wrong? Okay, let's go back. Okay, now we're going to hire another 30. Oh, okay, cool. Like we only fired 10 this time. Okay, let's do it again. And like, you get to the point where every 10, 15 hires you're doing, you're maybe only letting go 1 or 2 a quarter.
Right, but bringing it back to like a startup like ours or any other product, right? So we're not talking about hundreds or even dozens of hires, right? So we're talking about like a handful, let's say, to build the core team.
Yeah.
So clearly the pains of not hiring the right person
Yeah.
are much more severe, right?
Yeah.
The time suck in dealing with all of that is that much more terrible. And like, for example, I always talk about like finding ways to determine that quickly.
Yeah, yeah.
But then that's also difficult because the learning curve. What if the person not performing because the learning curve is not there? I know you guys, for instance, have like benchmarks around the learning curve, like a 60-day benchmark average. Anybody goes beyond that, that's a red flag, right? So that's the sort of processes that it sounds like you guys have, right, that ensure sort of the steady growth.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that we're in that 9 out of 10 just yet.
Right.
I think we might be closer to that 60%, 70% mark. But I think it's doing well, right? Like if we look back in all the support and sales team members that we brought on, like it's been very steady. We've had opportunities to like migrate team members to other departments because we definitely saw a better fit there and things like that. But I think realistically is like find your top performers. Really try figuring out, getting into their mind, like what is it that's motivating them to be here? What is it about the structure that I have in my team, in my department, or in my organization that makes them thrive? Because not everybody's gonna be the same, right? You might have someone that on paper is exactly the same, but from a personality perspective, where one person thrives in a lack of structure, right? Like in a startup, very, very often we don't have all systems and processes and everything documented all pretty, but some people just struggle with that, right? And so you can either try to find more people who have similar personalities, and obviously there's personality assessments that you can do to kind of figure those matches, or you can kind of try to build a structure so that more types of people can thrive and produce the same results.
What do you think of people having, let's call it sort of territories? Do you think that has its place in the work environment? I don't know, like in support, this would be, let's say you have a certain team member responsible for a certain area, and then another person responds or whatever. I don't know, in marketing, this would be a person, I am the social media manager, but then, I don't know, another person posts on social. In developers, that's my code and you touched it. Like, what do you think of it? Like, is this inevitable? Is this preventable? Is this even helpful to have that?
Yeah, preventable almost sounds like it's a disease that we want to avoid. I think it's in the evolution, maybe similar to recruiting, the evolution of an organization. You start with generalists, and it's a founder and maybe a co-founder who are trying to do everything themselves so that we can get it off the ground running. Hopefully it ends up in a spot where you've got a lot of specialists who are excellent, who outperform even us in doing those specific skills that we've hired them to do.
But can people be protective though of that? Like, is it okay for people to kind of feel like we owe them their territory? So that's sometimes what I see in corporate world, right? So, well, like I run this sort of area and that's my job. Like if all of a sudden you get in, that sort of somehow jeopardizes my position. You know what I mean? There's sort of this corporate sort of nonsense that sort of happens sometimes. Are we immune to that?
I don't think so. I think, like you're saying, like overstepping. Someone feels like you're overstepping if you're trying to give them advice or give them.
But not even advice, like the team members between them, right? So you have two team members. Ultimately, like let's say one of our team members is updating articles, and that's kind of her role. And then all of a sudden you have another team member coming in and updating an article, and the first person says, no, what are you doing? That's mine. Is this ownership appropriate?
It sounds like fostering a more collaborative environment is probably a good idea. Communication. Look, we're going to step on each other's toes. This is kind of natural, right? We work with people. People are people. We're dynamic. We have personalities. We might wake up and have a bad day, but at the end of the day, if we're fostering collaboration, saying, hey, we are in this together. Right. We want to get to this goal. Then the conversation should hopefully be less tense. Should be like, hey, I noticed that you did this thing to this article, but I was working on it. Let's create some clarity on when is it okay for you to get in? When is it okay for me to get into your area?
Yeah, I just feel like
maybe not the answer you were looking for.
No, but I think I think you're right. I think it's a very sort of, it's tough to just have like a clean cut rule for this. I think people do tend to be like territorial a little bit, like with respect to some of the work that they're being held accountable for. I just find it quite detrimental to sort of the performance of an organization when you have basically somebody who's not allowing anybody else to kind of like enter a particular area just because they have certain issues with, I don't know, job safety, security, you know, and whatever other anxieties they might have. So I think like dealing with those anxieties, as you said, it's not you and your job, right? It's the overall goal,
Yeah.
right? And if there is somebody here to help and facilitate,
Yeah.
you're just gonna have to accept it because there's no you, there's us, right?
Exactly.
So that's sort of his mentality.
Exactly.